Okay. Hi, Mandy.
Hello.
I think we're live.
Good stuff.
So we'll just give it a minute or two to see if anyone wants to join us live, and then we'll get straight into it because I think a lot of people will watch the recording. And at some point, I'm going to have to tell you what happened last night with my son who didn't sleep.
Oh no.
I thought, sod's law, isn't it, with doing a sleep interview, and then we had sleep issues that we've not had in ages last night.
Oh heck, well, hopefully we can try and unpick that a little bit.
Okay, just gonna double check all the tech. Does it look all right your end, Mandy?
I'm just double checking. Let's just come up the line. Yep, all good.
Okay, the only thing I can't see any, if there's any comments. Oh, yeah, I can see a hi from Debbie. Hi, Debbie. Yeah, okay. Right, let's just get into it.
Yep.
So welcome. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I'll just do a little introduction. So I think most people know me. I'm Hannah Munro. I'm a specialist occupational therapist, and I work with children and young people. Not all have a diagnosis, but I work with a lot of people with autism, ADHD, dyspraxia, and sensory differences. And I'm based in Ulverston in South Cumbria, but I do work with people all around the world online. And I have invited Amanda Bland, which I'm really excited about. I've been wanting to do this for a long time because I know sleep is such a topic. So Mandy is a lead sleep practitioner for a Stitch Different CIC, which is a not-for-profit organisation. And Mandy, I believe you were also helpline support at the Sleep Charity, specialising in SEN. Is that right?
That's correct, yes. You'll often find me online on a Wednesday morning supporting families on the free helpline there. So, yeah.
Okay, and I know you specialise in SEN, but am I right in thinking that you've done a really interesting course recently and you're looking at other areas?
Yes, indeed. I was honoured to be invited on the Edinburgh Sleep Medicine course, which focused on a lot of different areas of adult sleep. And the particular area of interest is cognitive behaviour therapy for insomnia. So that's something I'm really getting into and finishing up my case studies now, and looking forward to being able to offer that out to other families. And like you, because of the technology now, we can go nationally. Or internationally. So yeah.
And is that often helping the parents of the children with SEN as well?
Indeed, and I'm a parent carer too. I have a 26-year-old son with autism, and we've had our own sleep issues along with other journeys, should we say. And yeah, as a parent carer, we often find that supporting our children, our own sleep suffers, not just with the wake-ups of the kids kicking off or whatever their wakings, but also we then get into other habits that are slightly different to our children's. So CBTI can be a really good support for that. So yeah, looking forward to getting that going.
Great. Okay, so we've got questions from parents today, but perhaps before we get into the questions, if you want to give an overview of anything, like I guess it's fair to say that there's a limit to what we can do in this session. I imagine your sleep training is, hours and hours. But what's that kind of really crucial information that you need to start with?
I think there's a couple of things that are really quite important to try and understand, and particularly with children and children with SEN, we often find a real commonality is that kids are going to bed and they're not waking up to, they might wake up 3 hours later or 4 hours later, and then they're full of beans, wired and up for the day. That is so common. And I think if we explain potentially why that might be, and that follows it in with the sleep cycles. So I don't know if anyone's heard of the circadian rhythm or body clock. And then when that's your 24-hour sleep-wake cycle. But when we actually fall to sleep, it goes into different phases. So you may have heard the term REM or non-REM, and basically they're different forms of sleep. So initially, when we go to sleep, we go into a deep phase of sleep initially called non-REM, non-rapid eye movement sleep. And that is where all the body restorative stuff goes on, okay? And then the term REM, rapid eye movement sleep, you might remember this from when you had babies, or if you've got animals, you'll see their eyes sort of flickering.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's basically REM sleep. And what that's your brain sleep. That's your brain development, it's your processing. Effectively, that's what's going on then. So during our night, we do different phases of sleep. I'm going like this because usually when I'm presenting a workshop or whatever, I'd have a lovely screen explaining what this might look like in real terms. And these cycles typically last 90 minutes. Mm-hmm. Initially, the first one, 90 minutes to 2 hours. And in between our sleep cycles, we go that deep phase first, and then we come out of that sleep, that deep phase of sleep. We come to a very short space at the top there, about 90 minutes in, of rapid eye movement sleep. Now, when we're in that phase of sleep, we're very easily disturbed. And thinking about environmental changes, we haven't developed that much from our primitive brain from back in the caveman. And we go into a state of, oh, is there a bear going to come and get into my cave? And so if there's been anything environmentally changed, such as lighting, temperature, sounds, etc., we're very easily disturbed at that point. Mm-hmm. And it's so common for these 90-minute cycles. The second cycle, we generally come to a semi-wake point. And what that means is, as adults, we all do this. As adults, what that looks like is we might just roll over, adjust the duvet and nod back off. But for particularly children with additional needs, that they're so fine-tuned because of their sensory issues a lot of the time, they're so fine-tuned that the subtlest of change, ping, I'm wide awake, and we get flooded with a bit of adrenaline because to the child, it might feel as though there's a bear coming into their cave and you are not safe. That's the body saying, I'm not safe. So, hey presto, I'm awake, I'm flooded with adrenaline. That adrenaline can take a good hour and a half to subside. So it's no wonder the kids are waking up. So it's really important that we pay attention to environment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And I'm just wondering, when you say the subtlest change can wake them up, what kind of things are we talking about? What are the common ones?
Well, one of the really common ones that I get an awful lot, especially on the helpline, is lighting. Uh-huh. So really important to have that consistency in lighting. Subtle things like if the child goes to bed and you leave the landing light on, mm-hmm. when you go back downstairs or do whatever you do as parent, carer, and then when you go to bed, you turn that light off. Even that little slither of light underneath that door is a subtle enough change. So just thinking about these things, thinking about, is there a bus going past? Thinking about that 90-minute cycle, what's happening? And is it a time when you may be going to bed and they're coming to their semi-wake point, and then you're just going upstairs or whatever? That can be a reason for waking. Temperature, another good one, mm-hmm. in terms of keeping that regular, that consistent 16, 18 degrees is really what we need. Sometimes the cooler the better, because that actually supports slightly deeper phase of sleep, but obviously not, we don't want the kid cold or any of us cold for that matter, but that slightly lowering of body temperature can make a big difference.
And so I know some parents that use kind of white noise, pink noise type apps, and you get the apps that play all night long, and then you can also get the ones that switch off after about a half an hour. And I know a lot of parents will think, well, they're asleep, so it can just switch off, but that's sounding like that could be an issue, is it?
It is indeed. Again, it's that consistency. We have it with sounds, and again with lighting. I mean, I know as babies, and one of the first things I ask a family is, have you got any of these what look fabulous lights that go onto the ceiling? They might be quite calming and what have you. It might be a colour changing light or a projector, which seem quite soothing. But again, if that light is, say, pink when the child drifts off, and then it's rotated and it's then green at their semi-wake point, or it's been turned off, that's another indicator of often why kids wake up. So it's just that, keep it consistent. If you like a colour, you like a light, try and keep it static. Same with the sounds, consistent. And you're quite right there. The white noise, and particularly pink noise at the moment, there's a lot of research being done around pink noise at the moment through the Edinburgh Sleep Centre that I was at the conference with a few weeks ago. And that was really coming through. So it's definitely worth a try. And sometimes you don't need a big sleep study to resolve an issue. It can often be just a small tweak or thinking about things in a slightly different way.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. We use pink noise and we have that on all night now. And that really helps because what used to wake my son up was bird noise. And I think that's two things. One, I think it's what you're saying is that bird noise wasn't there when he went to sleep. So there's that difference. And I also think because he's so sound sensitive, so he wears ear defenders in the daytime, and that the pitch of bird noise, I don't think is particularly pleasant to some people. So I think there were multiple reasons there that bird noise was waking him up.
So yeah, it's something that just we wouldn't necessarily think about, would we?
No.
So and it's sometimes just that little, worth a try.
So just so I make sure that I completely understand what you're saying about the sleep cycles, and let's say you've left something in your child's room and you really need to creep in and get it.
Okay.
Which point then, from when they went to, let's say, they were fast asleep at 9 p.m. When am I safe to creep in and grab something?
Right. So it typically takes about 20 minutes to go from a wake point into that very deep phase of non-REM sleep. Okay. So that's your time when you can nip in and do what you need to do. Equally, if your child requires you to settle at night, that is the time when you can start and creep out.
How many parents relate to the creeping out and then thinking you've got to the door, oh my God, I've done it, and then you haven't and you have to go back?
So I always think of whatever time you think you've been there, because this is the strategy we used with my son. Whatever time you think you've been there, double it.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, because in our mind, even if we haven't got a watch on or anything like that, but typically it's a good 20 minutes to get into that deep phase. Usually some children 15, but I say 20 minutes. But the thing we need to remember there is if you're with the child when they nod off and they come to their semi-wake point and you're not there, what happens? Ping, by the way. So in that case, what we want to try and promote is the child being able to self-settle initially on their own.
Okay. And
one of the best strategies, particularly with kids with SEN, is what we call gradual retreat. And that is where you would stay with the child. Indeed, this is the strategy that worked for us. And we went from me laying with my son, and then I went to sitting up with my hand on his chest. And I did that for 3 days. And then I crept down a little bit, I moved my hand from his chest to on the bed. Did that for 3 days. And then I crept down towards his hips. We did get a bit of a wobble in terms of he realized what was going on. So then I had to backtrack and go back a stage.
Okay.
And then eventually in time, he learned to self-settle. And this is the importance of that routine that we'll probably come on to at the end there. But eventually we crept out and he was able to self-settle. And therefore, when he come to his semi-wake point, he didn't need me there. So you're actually building the child's emotional resilience. You're doing them a favour and you're teaching them how to sleep.
But also it's tying in with that gentle parenting approach. And I loved when you said, and then he wasn't so sure and you went back a step. So this isn't about pushing children beyond what they're ready or causing any emotional stuff, is it? It's so gentle.
Exactly. And at the Sleep Charity and all my training, it works on a positive behavioural support approach. And it is a behavioural approach that we work with. And we know it's effective. There's been many clinical trials and we know there's a 95% success rate when we work on a behavioural approach.
Great. Okay, shall we get into some questions?
Yes, indeed.
I think I'm going to queue jump, and mine's not actually a question. I just thought it was really interesting what happened last night, because my son's doing quite well with sleep. This is my older son, who's autistic, and interestingly, he was 2 hours later to sleep because he was so badly constipated. And he has interoception difficulties. So as you know, Mandy, that's about not understanding sensation on the inside of the body. So he just kept saying, my body's sore. But because his stomach was swollen, and because I know he does have constipation, I knew it was his tummy. And actually, when I touched his tummy and I said, is it sore here? He was able, he has got better with interoception. But it made me think, Mandy, that sometimes, sometimes it's not these things. It's not the sleep routine. It's not screens. It's not all these things. It can be something
internal. Yeah, indeed. And that is quite, again, a real common one, particularly with people on the autistic spectrum, is that I don't know, it's limited, whether it's the limited diet or what, but basically that constipation, it does put pressure into your stomach. And it's a real common one for kids waking, because and they might not know why, because it's that internal sense. And it's just us as parents and carers being mindful. Have they been to the loo? And the number of families that, when I've delivered all the training, they said, when we do a 4-week program or something, they'll say, actually, she had a poo today and we had a cracking night's sleep. And I think, yeah, that's it. So just be mindful. And whilst we're thinking about bowels, yes, especially if children sleep on the side, that can, the pressure of that bowel, it is uncomfortable. And you are right, if we've got a bit of an upset stomach, it isn't particularly nice, and we'd find it difficult to sleep.
And I think also that a lot of children I work with want to hold it, and they can have a bit of fear around going to the toilet, but then obviously when you fall asleep you relax, so it can almost want to come in the night.
Exactly.
Which is helpful.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just being mindful, and obviously seeking support if you need support around bowel issues. It's just making notes of it, and next time you go and see your doctor or your paediatrician, just saying, look, we've got, we're a little bit constipated, it could be affecting the sleep, and what can we do for support around that?
Yeah. And I think, sorry, Mandy, I was just going to say that actually, there's, in terms of the behavioural approach that you'll talk about and some of the ideas, it's almost, before you get into all of that, sometimes it can just be something really, really straight. I'm not saying constipation is straightforward to deal with, but it could just be something straightforward, and you don't necessarily want to be just presuming there's all these complex issues when sometimes it's just something like that.
I would say, particularly with children on the with special needs or with autism, etc., often it's a small tweak in the routine that makes a big difference. And it is something, just being mindful. Have they been to the loo and addressing that, or thinking about, hang on, we have got a colour changing light, let's have that static. Let's think about when we go upstairs, are we in that sleep cycle? Are we going to disturb the child when we go up? It's just little things like that to try that can potentially make a big difference. And obviously it's not just the child that's getting better quality sleep, us as parents get that better quality sleep. Yeah. And it's that ripple of calm then, isn't it? Where that, if they're getting quality sleep, they're a lot happier, the behaviours can diminish. The parents have an easier time, the child's better able to learn and be more rounded and ready to do other activities if they've had that sleep.
I'd love to pick up on what you've just said, actually, because a lot of my work is looking at some of the difficulties in the daytime. But actually, if I'm not careful, I can be trying to look at, well, what's the cause of that behavior, and but actually it could be as simple as they just need more sleep. Exactly.
And everything we do during the day builds up to how we sleep at night as well. Looking at anxiety, looking at the sensory needs, have all those things been addressed? Are we, trying to understand what's going on with the child and say meeting those needs? Because if we can keep the child quite settled and regulated before bedtime, we've got a better chance of getting a good night's sleep.
Great. Shall I get into the first question then? I think it's quite a meaty one. So the child has ADHD.
Let me write this down.
Yeah, they can't switch off. It can take them hours to get to sleep. The parent can't leave them, otherwise they just get up and act like it's daytime.
Okay.
Parent says that they have a good routine. They make sure there's no screen time before bed. They have sleep music. The child reads and they read to the child. Yeah.
Okay. That's a good meaty one to start with, isn't it? It's a good challenge to come up with an instant fix on that one. So obviously, when we're looking at these things, we're being a bit of a detective and we're looking for clues as to what might be going on. If the child is not going to sleep within, say, half an hour of getting to bed, that would indicate to me that that individual's sleep circadian rhythm, they're not ready to sleep.
Okay.
It would potentially mean that they are night owls. So we're either a lark or a night owl. So we're either, up late or... So obviously that doesn't always fit in, especially with younger children, with schooling, etc. So, and it's something that we can work on. But I would say if we're taking 2 hours, obviously we need to work on regulation during the day and make sure that they're as calm as they possibly can be. But I would think that the bedtime's too early, potentially. We do need to look a little bit more. We could do with a little bit more information in terms of keeping a sleep diary to see what time that child goes to sleep on an average. Mm-hmm. And we would start at that point, the average time the child went to sleep, and say, they're going to bed at 9, they're not asleep till 11. Yeah. I would say that actually try starting the bedtime routine at 10 p.m. I know that's hard on us as parents and caregivers when we need our bit of time for us, and I totally get putting the child to bed at an earlier time, but actually investing say 3 or 4 weeks in trying to resolve this sleep issue could give a long-term benefit, and everyone will get the life back.
So Mandy, are you saying that's just the starting point to push that bedtime back? You're going to do something to kind of try and move it a little bit? Or
yeah, so what we would do is we would suggest moving the bedtime that to work the average time up that they're falling asleep, work an hour back.
An hour?
1 hour. But it's really important that the bedtime routine is no more than an hour long, because it then doesn't associate with sleep. We often get families saying, I've got a brilliant routine. And I'll say, well, what does it look like? And they say, well, 5 o'clock we have our tea. 5:30 we'll play a game. Then at 6 o'clock we'll have our bath. Then we'll go up at about 7:30. That isn't a bedtime routine in the context that we need to help the child get to sleep. So what we ideally need, I call it a golden hour, the hour before sleep. And in that hour, and you did a brilliant video the other day, Hannah, on the bedtime box. And that's something I often recommend, because it can be a cue, a communication cue that this is the build up to bedtime. So I think we need to understand how our children communicate, and the best way of communicating the bedtime hour, whether it be verbal, whether it be by bringing out a box, whether it be by using visuals, thinking about that. And that hour before sleep needs to be calming and chilling. So doing some of your sensory strategies that you've done your videos on are absolutely superb. The bedtime box can come out. I think it's important to have a little bit of supper, particularly with younger children. We often find, especially if they're quite light, they sometimes wake up because they're hungry still. So having a little bit, a piece of toast, a bit of cereal, obviously watching your sugar levels and not having it too heavy, but just a snack before bed is quite good. A nice drink, milk, if they like milk, is a really good sleepy food. So thinking about that. Try and avoid blackcurrant juice if you can, because that we know for some people can be an irritant to the bladder, and again a reason for waking in the night. So just be mindful if your child does have blackcurrant and they have got a bit of a sleep issue, just try it out. It's a bit of an experiment. We just never know, do we? So with this particular child, think about the hour before sleep. Obviously, make sure their sensory needs are met. The screen time is a really good one. I'm glad they're doing what they're doing in reducing the screen time. because melatonin, which I know is, quite vastly prescribed, as a sleep practitioner, we're not medics in that term, so we don't get involved in melatonin, but we have had a lot of studies done that show that melatonin only gives about 20 minutes extra sleep per night, where a behavioural approach can give 2 hours 40. So we do obviously prefer a non-medical approach.
Andy, and I do know that you've said to me before that the difficulty that parents come across is that melatonin feels quite easy, and when parents have got so much going on, as we both do, that melatonin feels like the easy answer, whereas a behavioural sleep approach, I think you've said to me, it can be like a month of real.
Yeah, I mean, but usually if we're going to implement a new routine, it's often good to get the child involved and offer choices. So if we're going to put a bedtime box together, have 2 or 3 choices of different activities. I think just lost my train of thought there. Remind me again, what was your question?
Well, I was just saying basically that the behavioural approach in the end is the winner. You'll get there, but you've got to put the work in.
You do, and it is generally 3 or 4 weeks of a bit of intensity. And I find that if we involve the child, this is where I was going, I lost my train. If we involve the child at the beginning in implementing this new routine, using things that the child engages with and they enjoy, doing those calming activities, offering choices to do calming activities. Is it going to be Play-Doh tonight, or is it going to be building bricks? Doing fine motor stuff, things like that. Are we going to read 1 story or 2 story? And what I was also come to about the screen time is the melatonin is actually produced at the pineal gland at the back of the eye, so it's triggered by darkness. So when the sun goes down, the moon comes up, again, going back to caveman days, we can't hunt in dark. So if we think about that, and we can promote that natural melatonin, because the brain doesn't know the difference between sunlight and the light emitted from modern day devices. So that's why we say try and avoid screen time. There are some cases where some children or individuals don't naturally produce as much melatonin. So we have to take that into consideration. But I think it's always worth putting that behavioural approach in first. And we often, days 1, 2, 3, potentially 4, go down quite well, because we're implementing something new, something they enjoy, they're getting that time with parent to interact with, and they quite like it. Then days 4, 5, 6, and 7 can become a bit of a living hell, and everybody is exhausted. And that is the point when most families give up and think, this is not working. What is the point? I've been there. We've tried it. It is hard. So it's often choosing the timing, thinking about, have we got school? School holidays are a perfect time for implementing a new bedtime routine, because we don't have to, it doesn't, well, yes, it always matters if we're exhausted, but there isn't as much going on potentially during the day that we have to think about.
So Mandy, let's say, people are listening and they're thinking, okay, we're going to give this a go. Summer holidays, we're going to implement this new golden hour that you talk about. Is there anywhere where there's kind of some written down or advice about how to implement like this golden?
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, there is. And indeed, the sleep charity who I was trained by and work with, they have just released 2 amazing ebooks, actually 3 now. We have one for parents and carers for young children, and it's full of information. So if you look on the sleep charity website, there's an ebook on there. If you've got an older child, potentially getting to teenagers, there is a specific website called the Teen Sleep Hub. Now, these websites aren't specifically geared for SEN families, but there's lots of hints and tips in there that would work across the board.
And what was that? Yeah. The Teen
Sleep Hub. There's a great ebook. It's full of videos that are teen appropriate. Yeah. If we've got a child who's a little bit PDA or ADHD and a slightly higher functioning and are a little bit younger, I always say to the, so I from 11 plus age, I always say to the families, have a look at the Teen Sleep Hub website, look at the ebook and the videos, and you'll be able to know where your child is at. whether they can understand. But a lot of kids like the idea of accessing that. I'm not quite a teenage yet, but I'm accessing something that's supportive, and it's aimed at people who are older than me, and they like that feeling.
It's more involved in it.
They're more involved in it, and it is pitched a little bit older, so it's a really good one. There is one for parents as well on the sleep for adults on the sleep charity website as well. So yeah, we work very closely with them.
Before we move to the next question, just something to pick up on when you said about screen time. I believe that's to do with blue light. Is that right?
Potentially, yeah. You can, blue light filters can help a little bit, because we know how hard it is to get our kids off screen times. But yeah, blue light can help a little bit, but we would prefer not to have the screen time and do something.
So I mean, the reason I was asking is because I know that a lot of children's night lights that are sold, say on Amazon and places, are often blue, and that's not great, is it?
No, it isn't. We would if we're going to have a night light, we would suggest maybe like an amber tone.
Okay.
So one of those, the vintage light bulbs.
Yeah.
That sort of tone, that soft amber is probably the best colour to go for if you're going to have a night light.
Okay.
But we don't want anything.
When you have the colour changing ones that you can have static, I mean, they do have red. Is red any good?
Red's pretty good. Yeah, red can be okay. Red, or we normally say amber to red tones, not the blues.
Not the blue. Yeah.
Okay.
Obviously,
the only thing that contradicts that is the grow clock.
Yes.
So the grow clock is a device that if you've got a child that wakes up and wants to get up super early, and they've got the ability to understand that colour changing. So I don't know if anyone's familiar with the grow clock. It does have a blue glow to it. There is research around that it does have a filter on it. But again, it's trial and error. Everyone is so unique.
And you can set the grow clock. I think it's got like a 1 to 5 scale in brightness, so you can have it on 1.
But chill it down.
Yeah. Okay, great. So the next question, I'm not sure if it's similar to what we've just talked about or different. Child with ADHD again takes 2 hours to get the child to sleep, and then they get up at 5 a.m. That's all the info we've got. Is there anything you can?
Obviously, there's a few things to take into consideration there. The 2 hour falling asleep 2 hours, again, I would be looking at moving the bedtime, thinking about working where they are now. What we don't have, we need a lot of history really when we're working with families. So they're waking up at 5 a.m. That actually could be about right if they went to bed a little bit earlier. We don't know what time that child's going to bed.
So with a set amount of hours depending on age, or does it not work
it's
like
very
that?
vague. It's I mean, I've got my chart here. They reckon a 3 to 5 year old anywhere between 11 and 13 hours a day, 5 to 12, 10 to 11 hours roughly, but everyone is unique. And I would be thinking again, if that child is going to bed a little bit later and they're waking up at 5 a.m, I would be thinking, is there something environmental? Is it the lightness of the day that's causing that child to wake up? They could be because we typically, going back to sleep cycles, we typically have 4 cycles each night. The first 2 focusing more on deep sleep, your body restorative sleep. The latter is more your REM sleep, so that's your brain processing. And that actual REM sleep is a lighter phase of sleep. So you are more likely to be woken in the latter part with environmental differences, and particularly this time of year with it being so bright. So I would also be thinking at 5 a.m, what could be going on? Is there a bus going past? Is the boiler clicking in? Is there, the milkman? Just think about these things. What could we've got to be a bit of a detective and think about all of it. And that's where your sleep diaries come in.
Okay.
Sleep diaries are really invaluable at helping us to understand what might be going on.
So is that if a family was wanting kind of individual support from yourself or a sleep practitioner, is that the starting point, the sleep diaries? Yeah,
we always would ask to see at least 2 weeks of a sleep diary. And we would continue the sleep diaries right throughout the programme, because what we're looking for is consistency. You can do this yourself. you know, you don't necessarily have to. I mean, we obviously love to help families, and being a non-profit, we do it as cheap as we possibly can, but you can do a lot of this yourself. So in the ebooks that I've mentioned, there is sleep diaries in there, and just by keeping them for a couple of weeks, you'll be able to identify what time the routine might have started, what time the child fell asleep, what time they might have woke up, and how did you react. That's a big important one. We'll come back to that later, is what we do if the child wakes. And then what time did they get up? And we're looking for that consistency, and then thinking, what's gone on that day or that morning? What happened? You'd be surprised. A lot of the time, environmental, sensory, they could be, you know, to take into consideration.
So the sleep diary could show that actually it's always like a Tuesday and a Friday, actually, and then it's like, well, what happens the day before, or you know,
is that the day we didn't do our trampolining? Is that the day we did something extra? Is that the day we had our tea particularly late on?
And I guess also maybe for older children or more able children, is anxiety around the next day? What's happening at, like, if they're at high school, what's the next day? Is it always, you know, maths in the morning? And
yeah, exactly. And anxiety and sleep are massive. It's one of the biggest contributors to poor sleep is anxiety. So really important that there is any anxiety. And a lot of the anxiety is not just worry around school, etc. It can be that other anxieties around communication and how a child might learn. Are they getting frustrated because they haven't got the skills to get over what they need? Yeah. And if the needs aren't met, that can build into an anxiety. So it's
and then Amanda, you said to me how when you saw my bedtime box activity, you had commented how important it was that I had said that the journaling or discussion with a child reflecting on the day, that wasn't in the golden hour.
No,
that
definitely not.
Earlier on in the evening, otherwise you're going to bed with that anxiety fresh.
Exactly. So anything like that might be anxiety provoking, like thinking about schooling or doing homework, things like that, we would never do in the bedtime hour, because it's going to get that adrenaline going, and thinking about that adrenaline taking an hour and a half to subside. We want to keep things calm. And actually thinking about back to both questions, actually, both of those taking 2 hours to settle. Think about I mean, most of us would go to bed, clean our teeth, or have a shower bath before bed. For some children, sensory-wise, if that is really something that's alerts them or distresses a child, that's going to get that adrenaline going. So if we've got somebody who really hates, you know, the hair brushed or their teeth cleaned, think about a different time away from the bedtime hour. I mean, okay, yeah, ideally we want them to clean the teeth before bed, but actually, could we do it straight after tea? Could we have bath time a different time, well away from the sleep time? Because that's a really common one with the senses.
Well, especially teeth brushing, because that's a classic straight before bed activity, but also it's a classic sensory issue, isn't it?
It is indeed. So you're heightening that up, you're alerting, aren't you? So, I mean, I know in an ideal world, but actually, how much damage if we did it a bit earlier on? We're still getting it done, aren't we?
Yeah, and it's prioritizing. You can't win in every category, can you? I think just before we move on from anxiety, something that you've corrected me on before, and I think it relates to what else happens in the bedroom and the bedroom association, because I believe I'm right in saying that, you know, you wouldn't ideally want the child to be doing homework in their bedroom, because then that's, go on, explain that better than me.
It is. So basically we want the bedroom ideally to be purely a place of sleep, because if we're doing other activities that might be anxiety provoking, i.e. doing homework in that bedroom, and that causes them stress and anxiety, whenever that child goes into that room, it becomes quite a negative place. So one of the things that we can do, because not all of us have got houses or mansions where we can split things off. So just separating a little bit. So maybe putting a sheet over, you know, an old duvet cover over the desk if they're playing it, or any toys. So we want to differentiate the room from day to night.
Oh yeah, so it's not just about anxiety, it's also if you don't want the child to associate in that room with like running around
with
crazy,
play.
having lots of
No,
fun, because you need it.
We need it calm, we need it dull, and we need the room to be as chilled as possible. Just keeping it nice, calm, and say separating off. I mean, I had a client once where the child would get up in their semi-wake point, they'd wake up for whatever reason, and they'd get the colouring books and they'd be there colouring for 2 hours. So again, what we suggested there was actually, could we take the colouring away at night? Can we remove that from the bedroom environment? Another one used to turn the light on and off to get attention. So we say, well, actually, what trial? Just as you leave, the light's off, take the bulb out, and then in time, the child learn, actually, I've not got access to this, so I may as well just go back to sleep. We're not being cruel. We're teaching our children how to sleep, and that improves a whole host of, the development, the immune system, everything, if they're getting that quality sleep.
I guess, what I've learned with my children is not just with sleep, with everything, things that other children just tend to pick up naturally. Like you barely have to teach them, they just seem to pick up through natural development. Everything seems to be explicitly learned, whether that's, rather than half an hour tying shoelaces, it might take 2 years. And,
Exactly.
my 11-year-old still can't fasten buttons and wipe his bottom. Everything takes longer, and it's the same with sleep, isn't it? It's going to take longer, and it has to be learned. It does just happen naturally.
It doesn't always come naturally, like you say. It's something that we need to teach our children, and in time, positive change is doable. We know that it's clinically proven. But the unfortunate thing is, as parents and carers, our lives are chaotic, and it's really hard. And we, as care parents, and one of the programs I deliver, we stress the importance of self-care for ourselves as carers and supporters of children, that we get the time to reboot, so that we're in the best place to support our children when we try and do these things like learning to sleep, or as you say, learning to do shoelaces, etc.
Hard, isn't it? And single parents especially, that's I can't imagine.
super hard. And this is where support is available. There is.
And is that where the sleep? Tell me a bit more about the sleep helpline. How does that work?
So the National Sleep Helpline started 2 years ago, and thankfully I've been in from the very beginning, which has been quite privileged.
And is that free, Mandy?
That is totally free. Totally free. So again, if you look on the Sleep Charity website, all the information is on there. I'm generally on duty on a Wednesday morning. So that on a Wednesday, it's 9 till 11. It is a bit of a mad helpline at times, because we cover all ages. I mean, whilst I get forwarded the calls with families with SEN, young people, we actually cover from birth to elderly, and we cover all things in between, menopause, dementia, or for everything. So we're trained in all areas, but a lot of us have got specialisms, mine being SEN, and that's partly because I'm a parent carer and have been there.
Okay, great. So next question, I don't think you're going to thank me for this.
Oh, go on.
All right. Okay, a child autistic with ADHD, they would like to know how to support better sleep patterns. Doesn't want to sleep until 11 p.m. or midnight, but then sleeps for 12 hours. As a baby, this child slept for 18 hours out of 24. Has had melatonin for the last 4 years, but seems to have stopped being effective. I'm going to go on. Anxiety prevents daytime activity and outdoor activity. They're often not asleep after 2 hours of trying. They lie in bed, and actually once a week they can actually be up all night and kind of almost skip a night's sleep.
Okay.
I guess maybe I'll just, only a tiny bit of that is for me really, but I'm just aware in terms of the anxiety preventing the daytime and outdoor activity. Well, that's clearly I'm just aware, Mandy, of the need to build that sleep drive, and that physical activity. I work with lots of children, especially teenagers. I don't know how old this young person is, but I work with a lot of teenagers with anxiety that struggle to leave the house. And it depends on the house, but things like indoor swings, some of the things that I've shown, the sensory spider, the sensory tube, even just having a therapy ball or one of those IKEA rocking chairs. We need some kind of movement, and I massively appreciate that. It sounds like anxiety is preventing almost any activity at all, but that is key, isn't it? That physical, that movement activity.
Yeah, we need, as well as your circadian rhythm, your sleep-wake cycle, you need to build that desire, that sleep drive, the need for sleep, so you feel tired. And if we're not physically moving, we're not going to build that drive the same. But obviously there's a lot of things there that I would really need a lot more information. That's a bit of a tricky one. There's a lot going on there for that individual, that family. And again, age, if it is somebody who is a potentially teenage, we do know that teenagers generally do go, again, with all the hormones that are going on. And there, as teenagers, the circadian rhythm changes. It has a bit of a shift, and they go more into night owls. And we know it's really common for children to shift to be going to bed later and sleeping for longer. So if this is a person, age 12 upwards, I would say, well, actually, the 12 hours is probably, that's what a lot do. So I wouldn't have any underlying cause for concern, but we'd need to look at the routine and try and promote a lot more physical activity if we could.
Okay, and I think with ADHD especially, but autism as well, and I've experienced this with my son, we often experience this not being able to switch off.
Yeah.
So I'm just struggling a little bit. Sorry.
No, you're all right.
So I'm thinking, okay, we've got this golden hour, sounds great, but I remember, my son when he was younger, and he's like, he was echolalic, so he was repeating things he'd seen on YouTube. So the screen had gone, but it was over and over again, and he was repeating it while he was bouncing. And actually, he wasn't at that point getting enough input in the day. So that massively helped. But is there any thoughts on these children that just can't switch off, and it's like they're wired, and it's just
it is. I think it's that the distraction and keeping them moving on to different things. So that they're not getting to that echolalic, we can move it on. But obviously, this particular person, it sounds like we need other support as well. There's certain things as a sleep practitioner we can work on, and there are other things that need other professional input. And I would think that this person might need a multi-agency approach to look at what it is. And also, if they're on melatonin, they would need to speak to their doctor or pediatrician about the timing that they take it, because there has been some recent evidence to suggest that having half a mil at lunchtime actually gives better sleep. But I'm not a medical person, so they would need to speak to the pediatrician. This was just from.
And the tricky thing is, not all pediatricians are going to be up on the latest evidence.
No, that's the thing. Okay. So it is. I mean, if you think about the natural melatonin production coming with darkness, and it builds during the day. The melatonin production, it's after 4 p.m. it starts naturally producing, but because just the way the sun goes down, it just starts producing from about 4 p.m. in general. But again, if that underlying anxiety is rolling, and the ADHD, if we don't work on some of that, we're going to struggle with this particular family.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that for a lot of people, attending some general training or listening to these, reading these ebooks. For the vast majority of families, that's all that's needed, possibly with a call to the sleep helpline for a little bit of, but then there are these small percentage of families, and you're saying like this one, you need to go deeper, a lot deeper.
Yeah, this particular case, I mean, the other two, there might be some things that the families could try, like moving the bedtime back and maybe suggesting the bedtime box. So you get all that information from those ebooks that we've suggested. But this particular case, we would need a lot more information to be able to come up with some suggestions. But it might be that that family needs additional support from other agencies as well.
Yeah, I mean, the bit that's really jumping out to me, but I mean, I guess that's, you know, because of what I do, is that the anxiety is preventing little daytime activity.
It's quite, that's what I'm, that's the bit that we need, that needs, if we work on that, often sleep comes naturally.
Mm-hmm.
But we need to look at the bigger picture.
Yeah. And this isn't helpful, but I think we just need to acknowledge it, that many people's experience is that there's little help from CAMHS nationally at the moment, and so people are stuck, aren't they?
It is, and we've been in that situation ourselves, and I think the key is, if we as parents and carers, because obviously I know you're a carer too, get as much knowledge as we can. And if there is, I mean, there are some brilliant courses run by like the learning disabilities teams, etc. And I wish they wouldn't call them parenting courses, because that's not what they are. But if we can get as much information and as clued up as we can, we are the experts in our kids. So when we are approaching other professionals, you know, stick with it and say, look, I'm doing X, Y, Z, but I'm struggling with this. How can we work together so that my child best meets their outcomes and gets their sleep, etc. Okay. It's tricky. It is really, really hard in the current climate.
Okay, I think we've got one more question, and actually we're 5 minutes to an hour, so we're doing
our
hour. Okay, so this is a child that's nearly 4, has autism, is an early waker at 4:30 a.m. The parent asks, is it the melatonin or is it something else?
Again, we'd need to look at the sleep diaries to see what's going on. I would also be wanting to know what time the bedtime routine starts and what time that, you know, if that child was a 4-year-old, if they were going to bed, you know, 6, 7 p.m, actually, that sounds about right. And that's that child's natural wake-up time. One of the ways that we could maybe think about moving that so it was a little bit later would be to start the bedtime routine, say 15 minutes later. So if they've got a really good established golden hour and the child is settling at roughly the same time, really important to do the same things every single night. Same bedtime, same wake-up time. That strengthens that natural body clock circadian rhythm. Okay, so if that child is going to bed relatively early, say 6 or 7, something like that, shunt it back by 15 minutes. Do that for, say, 4 or 5 days, and you might find that the wake time goes from 4:30 to, say, 4:45. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because actually this parent isn't saying that they've got a problem getting to sleep, it's the waking early.
Time. So I would be looking at the sleep diaries and how long they're sleeping. 4-year-old probably needs about 11 hours a day. So if that child, you know, if they're waking up at 4:30 and they're going to bed at 6:30, actually, yeah, that's about right. So it's time to shunt that bedtime back a little bit.
Okay, and I mean, potentially, because you said that the sleep, the need for sleep is different for each child. They might just need a bit less.
Yes, sleep. Exactly. There is no set time. And as adults, it's how we feel. It's how restored and how we feel when we wake up. That's the important thing. I mean, yes, there's guidelines in terms of, you know, I'd be a bit concerned if a 3-year-old was only getting 6 hours sleep, but actually, you know, that's unlikely to happen.
So, Mandy, let's say this parent wants to aim to get to 5:30 a.m.
Yep.
So with this parent, let's say we're going to try and give them an hour.
Yep.
And you're saying that potentially if the amount of sleep this child's getting is right, then we need to put bedtime back by an hour. How we don't just do that on day one. What happens?
No, we don't. We work on 15-minute increments. And this is another one. So when the clocks go forward and back, this is how you deal with that. So a month before, say the clocks go back or forward, we would move that bedtime forward or backwards by 15 minutes. And then we would do that for, say, you know, 3 or 4 days. Again, we're guided by the child.
Mhm.
You know, it's a bit flexible, and then we would move it again forward by another 15 minutes. So there we've gained a half an hour back.
Yeah.
And then so over a month,
Yes.
move it up to a month, you know, because you might get it a little bit quicker than that, but we're guided by the individual child. But by just shunting it 15 minutes, because the body clock can absorb that 15 minutes, any more than that,
Okay.
it's too big a jump.
And so I think, though, you know, trying to listen to everything you've said, Mandy, before this parent jumps to do that, we need to be thinking about the environmentals of what's happening at 4:30 a.m. because there was that earlier a question that is there something at 4:30 that's causing the child to almost go in that fight or flight and wake up?
Yeah, because we don't know.
Lighting, temperature, is there a noise outside? Is that right?
Yeah, correct, yeah, because we don't know what time this child's going to sleep. And you're right, it could be that they're in their, you know, 3rd sleep cycle, they've come to a semi-wake point and something's triggered them. Or could it be that somebody's nipped to the loo, you know, and flushed the loo? You know, sometimes it's the little things like that, you know, that during that semi-wake point, what's going on? And bearing in mind, thinking about that hour and a half cycles, sometimes it's to 2 hours because we are all unique, but that hour and a half to 2 hours each one. Just thinking about that in between what's going on. I've got a little video on our Sleepability Facebook page that goes into a little bit more detail on sleep cycles. So if anyone wants to know a little bit more about that, that is on there.
So that's if they go to a Stitch Different website.
No, our Stitch Different website is just about to be relaunched. It hasn't quite made it yet. We're hoping to have it done by now. But no, we have a Facebook page called Sleepability. Sleepability. Okay. Yeah, it's something we've only just recently, you know, it's been lying there for a little bit, but it's something we're going to be doing a lot more work on in the future. Now we've got this additional training to help other families, and we've got quite a few sleep practitioners working with us now. So we'll be promoting that a lot more in the coming months. But yes, there is a basic video on there of me talking about sleep cycles, and there is some graphs and things that's done in simplistic terms. Hopefully not too heavy, that'll make some sense, and it's not too long.
Wow. Well, I cannot believe, Mandy, that we kept it to an hour, because I could talk to you about this all day long. Yeah. So I'm so grateful, and I'm sure all the parents listening will be super grateful as well. So I think, you know, if it would be really helpful, Mandy, if in this post, if you could in the comments maybe just put the links to, you know, a Stitch Different, Sleepability, the Sleep Charity, if you just could list all the links, that would be great. Yeah, I'll put the phone numbers into the helpline, etc. as well for you, no problem at all. That would be helpful, thank you. And then, so, you know, you're all that sleep, my little bit of sleep, but I guess quite significant, is those sensory activities. Definitely. And I think something maybe that I've not mentioned is that often people think, well, what can I do before or near bedtime sensory wise? Actually, we need to think of the whole day. Yes. And what I find a lot in terms of sleep and sensory activities, that we have a child that's been at school that hasn't had the sensory movement breaks they need. They've been kind of forced to sit pretty still all day. They get home, the parents try hard, they take them to the park, they have a therapy ball for them to bounce on. But the fact is that child's been sat still all day long with not enough movement breaks. Exactly. So, you know, for me, I really encourage parents to be impressing on schools the importance of the child getting the movement they need throughout the day. It got to be a partnership. Definitely. Yeah. And yeah, people are welcome to get in touch with me to ask about sensory movement type. Exactly. And it's so important, because everything we do during the day contributes to what goes on at night. And if we are not getting that regulation, that understanding of the sensory system for that particular, you know, the uniqueness of that child, you know, they're going to struggle with sleep. And obviously, if you know, and if they're not getting that sensory input, that's going to contribute towards their anxieties as well. So it's and I think it's not really acceptable for schools to say they're fine in schools, they don't need these sensory movement breaks, because they might look fine, but if they're not sleeping at night, then they're not fine. No, they're not. No. And also, yeah, Yeah.
And as a parent who's been there too, we do know that children are pretty good at masking during the day and then let it all out in their safe space at home. And I think as a parent, we need to keep at the schools and but assertive, not aggressive, and just going in and saying, look, you know, we find that if we do X, Y, Z, the child is much more regulated, or we've had input from Hannah, or, you know, to look at the sensory needs, and we have evidence to show that my child would really benefit from these regular, it's a sensory lifestyle. You know, it's not necessarily a sensory diary or diet or something. It's a lifestyle that child will need right throughout their lives potentially, you know. Well, yeah.
And actually, I think schools should be a lot more interested in sleep, because a good night's sleep, you're going to get a child that is learning and achieving a lot better. It links. Yeah.
And I mean, thankfully, some of the special schools, we have gone in and delivered training. So we have gone in on insect days and delivered sleep training, which is good. But obviously that needs to be more widespread. We need to be going into a lot more schools and spreading this word, and getting both the teachers and the families together to talk about sleep and the importance of quality sleep.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, thank you. And yeah, just thank you.
No problem. We'll
Okay.
always help where we can. And yeah, watch this space on our sleepability page, and hopefully we can help some other families.
All right, bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.